I have a question that I'll start with, and then we'll, it'll go a little weedy. I wanted to talk about the MSc BA and the expanded role contemplated. Could you help us understand about those conversations, if you have to staff up a little bit to get that done, how that will relate to DCAM, all of those kind of internal conversations that may have led, or decisions that may have led to that final plan?
Sure. So as you can appreciate, but I'll sort of repeat it for others who didn't participate in the working group, as we brought the three segments of higher ed together to talk about their needs, one of the things that became obvious is that there are a lot of needs at the community colleges, and there's a lot of have and have-nots in terms of their ability to do capital planning and to deploy capital projects in terms of having project managers and having the ability to manage projects. And in large part, DCAM does that on behalf of community colleges. They do that on behalf of state universities to a limited capacity. And what we've seen is for the state universities, and certainly for UMass, where you have a building authority, there's additional resources that are able to help with the contracting, the RPing, being able to help facilitate project delivery in many cases. And so we think that there's a lot of benefit to including the community colleges with the state universities to be able to have that same resource and to have an additional set of eyes working on those capital projects and thinking about them consistently across an entire segment as opposed to individual campuses having to go it on their own. So we think there's a lot of benefit that comes from that. And so that was part of one of the reasons why we went down that path. I think the other is just also recognizing the different ways in which higher ed funds projects. We are certainly putting significant resources on the table, the largest in many decades, if not ever, to address what we know is a challenging problem. We've been trying not to kick the can down the road. You've seen that in transportation. You're seeing it here again in higher ed, where really the problem's bigger than what's in front of us, but we're taking a big chunk of it by putting significant resources on the table. We also wanted to give those authorities, particularly the State College Building Authority, added flexibility, similar to what UMass already has, to be able to enter into private-public partnerships or other things that might help to leverage our state dollars for some of these more sophisticated buildings or opportunities that campuses have that they currently can't take advantage of now. So those were really the main reasons why we thought expanding the State College Building Authority right now to include community colleges and providing them an extra opportunity to do different types of financing similar to what's already in place and working well for the UMass system made a lot of sense.
Incredibly helpful. Thank you. I noticed the split between the direct spending in the sectors and the grants. And we talked a little bit with the university system around, the competitive nature of grants. And I wonder how the administration's imagining. So I appreciate the leveling of the playing field, the building playing field. I think that's, for me, that makes a lot of sense. Similarly, I wonder how you're imagining the rollout of grant programs and how you're thinking about making sure that colleges, universities with fewer grant writers, perhaps, or less of a shop to go compete, how they will compete equitably for the grants in the portfolio as it's currently structured.
Well, as you know, we have, the main authorization that we have in this bill, the $2.5 billion, is directly to the campuses, the individual campuses of higher education across all three segments.
Absolutely.
And then
right,
to complement that, we had additional authorizations that were more targeted towards specific programs and specific needs of the campuses. And a couple of, approaches that we can take to that. With respect to the $500 million in grant funding, we know that it takes, particularly for some of these larger capital projects, a couple years before you get design schematics in place and you can actually break ground. We wanted to hit the ground running on this right away, and having these grant programs gives us the capacity to begin addressing some of the modernization needs, some of the work skills, capital needs that are needed right away, and start putting this to work for the campuses. So again, these grants are available to all campuses of higher education. They're not specifically targeted to one segment or another, but as we met with the campuses, as we understood their needs, all of these campuses are in different place, and every segment is in a little bit of different place in terms of what their needs are. And so these capital grants were really designed to kind of get at some of the smaller projects, some of the projects that we can be more nimble, get the money out quickly, and make meaningful differences across the campuses. So we would look to developing a process to collect information for the campuses to make sure that we're addressing the needs of those campuses consistent with the programs that we've designed. We'd also look to those campuses board of trustees across the board to try to make sure that these are projects that are important to those campuses and can make the kind of difference that we hope they will. One example is housing. For example, we put a specific authorization in there to leverage some of the dollars that we have. The authorization gave us in the Affordable Homes Act to be able to repurpose some college assets for housing. We're in the process of doing that now. This would actually allow us to target that in a more concentrated way and hopefully be able to produce much more needed housing and help our campuses out with their long-term planning, capital planning, and converting some of those assets that are no longer needed on those campuses for something that is beneficial to the community around them. So those are some of the targeted things, and I think we would deploy them a bit differently, but with a process that encourages all 29 campuses to participate in.
Thank you. And I think that last statement is what I was trying to get at. I didn't say it very well, but it would be great to have a conversation with the administration about how the funding would roll out equitably, right? So that how shops that didn't have big dog, great grant writers would be able to compete equitably and also access that funding. You can tell where I come from, Secretary. Right?
I appreciate that, and I will just say, working with DCAM, we are committed to having a process, whether it be the direct projects, the money that's flowing directly through that $2.5 billion or some of these others, to set up a process that brings the campuses in, that has them at the table, that we can make sure that the money's deployed both equitably and fairly across the campuses, targeting the purposes, of course, for which it's intended.
Helpful.